Welcome to the first topic of our final module, Document Examination. We will begin by defining the term question document. We will list various characteristics associated with handwriting comparisons and then work to recognize the class and individual characteristics that might be seen in typewriter, copier, or printer documents. We will also discuss the various techniques to analyze alterations, erasures, obliterations, and variations in ink and paper. If we begin by discussing question documents, a question document is any object with handwriting or with print whose source or authenticity is in doubt. So this can be a wide variety of things. It can vary anywhere from documents that contain handwriting or documents that have been printed either through a typewriter's actions, the copying action, a printer's action, or it can also be documents that might have alterations to it, either through erasures, obliterations, or it might be charred documents or documents that have indentions. If we initially start by talking about handwriting, we have to think about the development of a person's handwriting. Children's handwriting is going to be very similar because they're taught with similar methods. Either the Palmer method or the Zahner-Bloser method are the two handwriting styles that are typically used when developing a person's handwriting. Handwriting will become more individualized as the person ages, though, and they will have minor changes that are going to be more unique to themselves. The handwriting can also change as a person ages and has a decline in their motor skills or through the use of a lot of drugs or medication. There are a lot of different things that will be taken into consideration when you're evaluating a person's handwriting. The angularity of it, the slant and slope of the various letters, the speed that they might be writing with, and also the pressure that they use on the writing instrument itself. The letters and the spacing between the letters and the spacing between the words is taken into consideration. Any proportions between letters and within letters and words is also taken into consideration. So the letter formation and combinations that are used, how letters are connected, where there's pen lifts and specific movements with the pen, how a person begins and ends various strokes, if there is a lot of unusual flourishes. All of these things are going to be taken into consideration when you examine a person's handwriting. Other factors that can also play into the variation of writing are the specific document itself. So if there's margins on the paper or the actual size of the paper, it might be taken into consideration the spacing that the writing has to take into account, if there's any crowding, if there's any insertions that are added after the document is actually written. And obviously also the alignment, spelling, punctuation, phraseology, and grammar that's used in that document. So handwriting can be used as a means of identification if enough samples are available. So there's once again the need for known writing exemplars, and these should be is similar to the question document if there's going to be comparisons to the document itself. So you want to try to duplicate this by using similar writing instruments and also similar paper. So if it's a pen that's actually been used, make note that the exemplars be done with a similar type pen, if not the exact pen, if that's a possibility. Because a person's handwriting will change if they're using a ballpoint pen or if they're using a fountain pen or a marker. Likewise, the paper should also be as similar as possible to the question document, because a person's handwriting can change somewhat if it's on blank paper or if it is lined paper. You always want to try to obtain non-requested exemplars and also requested exemplars. The non-requested exemplars are just going to be handwriting that would be done in the normal course of business. A requested exemplar is going to be one where you're specifically going to ask the person to write certain words or certain phrases, but this may cause them to make slight changes to their natural handwriting. So that's why it's necessary to get the requested specimens and then, if possible, also unrequested specimens. With the comparison of handwriting, the document examiner is going to take into consideration all characters in the document to locate areas where there are very unique handwriting traits. So this may be a lot of different things. The first might be the actual style of the writing itself. Does the person primarily use block letters, or are they using cursive or script letters? Is a lot of it uppercase or lowercase? A lot of this is going to play into the style of their overall writing. The shape of the letters can also be very important to note. The angularity and the slant of the letters, the various degree of curviness and the slope of the letters themselves. And you can see from these few examples that I have on the slide, handwriting can have a lot of variance to it. The speed of a person's writing can also come into play. Variations can be shown if a person is more hesitant in their writing or if they're more quickly writing it. Likewise, the pressure that they're actually putting on the document with the pen itself is going to affect the intensity of the color and the depth and the width of the various letters in the writing itself. You'd also want to pay special note to the letter spacing, the width of the actual letters and the spacing between any letters, and also the width of words and the spacing of the words themselves. The proportion between and within the letters should also be taken into consideration. The overall letter shape and the formation of the letters. If there's any connections between the letters, or if it is just the beginning and ending strokes of the various words. All of these things are going to be taken into consideration when you're doing handwriting comparisons or examinations. If we talk specifically about signatures, usually this is going to be very intentionally highly stylized representation of that person's normal handwriting. And it also can change depending on the specific document that that signature might be on. So if it's a very formal document, handwritings can appear slightly different than if it's going to be a signature on a very informal type note. But usually it's going to be signatures a lot of times that are going to be involved in your handwriting comparisons, just because a lot of times it's the signatures that are actually forged for financial gain. If we next think about some of the other machinery that might create documents for examination, the first of these would be a typewriter. And typewriters aren't as commonly used nowadays, but there still could be the chance that a document examiner may have to work with a document that has been produced on a typewriter. These involve a mechanical action and can result in wear and tear to either the keys or the metal spheres, depending on what type of typewriter it actually is. The older typewriters are going to have the keys that are subject to a lot of wear and misalignment. So they might show a lot of individuality to the actual letters themselves in the document. In later versions of the typewriter, it was more of the metal spheres that actually contained the letters. So these are going to have a little bit less mechanical disruption. On typewriters, the ribbons can also be examined because they're going to be striking that ribbon before they're striking the document. So there's going to also be indentions in that ribbon that could be compared. So it's generally going to be the mechanical actions that's going to make the documents a little bit more unique in the comparison of the characteristics. So they would be looking for wear and tear specifically to the keys and to those metal spheres to more individualize that typewriter. Documents can be compared that have also been produced on a copy machine. So a lot of times these are going to be unique to the machine itself because of imperfections in that machine. There might be imperfections on the drum that actually assist in that image formation. So it might produce irregular shaped characters in that copying process. Or it could be something as simple as specks of dirt or marks that are actually on the copying machine that are transferred to the document itself. There might be the occasion to also examine documents that have been printed. The character shape and the toner differentiation or the toner application methods can be used to distinguish the various printers. You can divide printers into impact printers or non-impact printers. And then there's also the possibility of working with documents that have either erasures, obliterations, or other alterations that have been performed to them. So with erasures, part of that document is actually going to be erased using some type of either abrasive type product or a chemical type erasure. So a lot of your abrasive type products are simply going to be the rubber erasers, but in some instances little areas might actually be attempted to be cut out with razor blades or a very small piece of sandpaper. This is going to cause a lot of visual disturbance to the paper fibers itself. There's also the possibility that chemicals can be used to cause the erasures. So it might be a chemical that's actually going to dissolve away the ink itself, or some type of a bleaching compound to the ink. Obliterations are usually considered to be some type of treatment to remove writing or to black out an area to conceal the original writing. So this might be where a pen has actually written over another area of a document. So it might be that the analyst can look for visible crossing strokes in that ink pattern. There's also instruments that can be used to enhance the lighting to assist with determining obliterations on a document. And this usually is combined with a variety of filters which can be used on the document to hopefully let some inks be absorbed or fluoresced, showing difference where obliterations have occurred to a document. And you can see from this example where a 0 had actually been added into the amount. And once again, that same document under different lighting to show that the one ink actually fluoresces with a particular wavelength of light. And this is just another sample shown with that same instrument, the original document, and then with the two different lighting settings where some of the ink is actually absorbed by the light, and in another instance where some of the ink is actually fluorescing. A document examiner may also have the opportunity to work with charred documents. So there might still be some ink and pencil that's actually visible that they might be able to do more comparisons with. These documents are usually going to be extremely fragile, but sometimes misting the documents with either water or alcohol will help strengthen those paper fibers and hold them together so that the document examiner can insert the document in glass or in a plastic sleeve to help preserve it while the examinations are actually performed. There might also be the occasion to work with a document that contains indented writing. A lot of times a note may be written on a pad and then that paper removed, and then the officer is wanting to see from the pad itself and the indented writing as to what may have been on the piece of paper that is now missing. So this impression can sometimes be detected with the use of an electrostatic detection apparatus. And this is going to actually apply a charge to a polymer film that's going to come in contact with that indented writing. And then toner powder can be applied to this, which will help reveal the indentions in that paper. At times, indentions can be revealed from pages about 4 or more below the original writing, depending on how much pressure had been used when creating that document. However, keep in mind some of the chemicals that are used to develop latent prints will prevent the use of the documents being analyzed with the ESDA. And this just simply shows you a little bit how that ESDA works, where the document is on the ESDA that has the film with the indented writing paper placed above that film so that the toner can actually attract to it. They may also have to work with the analysis of ink on the documents themselves. So usually this is going to involve a visual exam and also a chemical exam, an instrumental exam. The visual exam will help determine the class of the ink itself. So whether or not it's a ballpoint ink or is it some type of fluid ink. If it's a fluid ink, a lot of times it could be determined whether or not it's water-based or solvent-based. But then there's also usually a lot of different chemical exams that are conducted on the ink samples themselves. Initially, small little punches can be taken out of the document so that the majority of the document will stay intact. These are extremely small ink samples that are taken out of the document and then extracted from the paper using a solvent called pyridine. Spot test can also be done on these small little plugs or the dissolved or extracted ink that can give the examiner indications as to what pigments actually make up that color of the ink itself, because inks will usually be made of a combination of different pigments. And likewise, using thin layer chromatography, it will separate the various pigments that make up that color of the ink itself. Using gas or liquid chromatography, sometimes the actual dyes can actually be identified. The analyst may also have to perform analysis on paper samples. Usually they're asked to determine the identity of the paper, if they can determine the source or the origin of the paper and the date of the manufacturer. However, in most instances, this is going to be a comparative examination of the physical and chemical properties of that document or the paper itself, so known samples would have to be required. Doing this, you're comparing the physical and the optical properties, so it's going to be things such as the thickness of the paper, the weight of the paper, depending on a certain unit. So you might have a 1 by 1 inch square that's actually weighed. The color of the paper, and this can be done macroscopically or it can be done through instrumental analysis, and then the opacity of the actual paper itself, how easily light is going to be transmitted through that paper. The fluorescence of the paper can also sometimes be determined. A lot of papers will have whiteners or brighteners that were added into the document itself. So these will fluoresce under certain conditions. There's also several watermarks that might be seen on some documents. So these are usually going to be observed with transmitted light. The examiner is also going to try to determine the various chemical properties of the paper itself. So they might do different tests to determine the fiber composition. They can do examinations under a polarized light microscope to actually visualize the morphological characteristics of the fibers themselves, but then they can also use various stains to help identify, is it a cotton fiber or is it another type of fiber that's actually used in the production of that paper. So there's 3 common stains that are used to help identify what type of fiber is used in that document. They may also perform elemental composition on the document itself to see what type of fillers are actually in the paper itself. And then they also might do a series of chemical composition testing to see the various additives or to help identify the fillers and pigments that are in the paper, or if there's any coatings on that paper itself.